And we've got to come out of our comfort zone to serve the Lord. Because there's times that we've got to come out and encourage somebody or help somebody or witness to somebody, and we can't stay in our comfort zone. And so it mobilizes us for ministry. And now we're going to look at the last one, number 4 tonight, and that is to adore God in worship. And we're going to see the Thanksgiving dedication service that they had here in this chapter. So I want us to look at chapters 11, verse 17. It says in the middle of that verse was the principle to begin the Thanksgiving in prayer. Now, here's where we see a man named Matana, or I think it's Matana or Matana. I'm probably butchering that name. Well, he was the director who had led in thanksgiving and in prayer. And you see, in thanksgiving, when we're giving thanks, we are acknowledging God's generosity. You know, whenever you're thanking God, whether you're at home or church or wherever you might be, it's that moment when you acknowledge God's generosity to you and in your life. The fact that He saved you, the fact that He keeps you, and the fact that He cares for you and He loves you and He's there with you through every aspect of life. And so His generosity and His goodness goes far beyond anything you and I could ever begin to imagine in our minds. Because we need to start first of all with salvation, because I'm thankful tonight that God saved an old sinner like me. If it wasn't for Him saving me, I would be without hope, and I'd be lost and undone without God, and I would be on my way to hell had God not loved me and died for me and paid my sin debt in full. And I thank Him for that. I mean, most every day I try to remember to thank God for saving me and putting me in His family. And then I thank Him for my family that He's given me and my kids. And I thank Him for giving me a wonderful, great church to pastor and giving me opportunities to be able to study His Word and to preach and teach and all these things. I don't take that for granted. You know, not everybody gets the time that I get to study, because you have to work your job, and then when you get home you have to take either morning before you leave or after. But God has given me adequate time to study and to prepare, and not just for myself but for services coming up, and I thank God for that. I don't take that for granted. And I thank God for His benefits that He bestows daily upon us. Have you ever thought about that peace? I thank God for that peace that passeth all understanding. I thank God for that thou wilt keep him in perfect peace. So I thank God for that perfect peace. Now, the perfect peace is perfect because it comes from the one who's the Prince of Peace, who's perfect. He's perfect in every way. And so, thanksgiving, we are acknowledging God's generosity, and in prayer we seek God's help because we need help. And these themes right here in thanksgiving and in prayer are often expressed in song. And we see that here in verse 22. When you go down in chapters 11, verse 22, it says that of the sons of Asaph, the singers were over the business of the house of God. So we see right here that these themes were often expressed in songs, in singing to Him. That's why it's so important when we come to church that we sing, because our thanksgiving and our prayers are expressed through our singing, through our song. Because that's part of our worship. That's part of praising God for who He is. And if you sit or stand in church and you don't sing and you just sit and listen, you're missing out on an opportunity to express your praise and worship to God. I mean, we're here for one reason. And that reason is for the Lord. I mean, it's nothing else. So why not come and sing to Him? We're not singing to each other. We're singing to the Lord. That's part of our worship. If you remember, David had commissioned his worship leader, Asaph, that's who that was, Asaph, in a similar way, centuries earlier than this. If you remember in 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 8, it says, "Give thanks unto the Lord, call upon His name," because He's the one that we're giving thanks to. Have you been guilty of not giving Him enough thanks? I believe there's not a person in here right now can say they give Him adequate thanks. I mean, we have to work on it every day. And it's something that we ought to keep listed somewhere where you can see it. Have you given thanks to the Lord yet today? You know, so that way it reminds you. A good place to put it is on your refrigerator. Because I know the first place I go is my coffee maker. So if I want to know, I make the coffee, and the next step that I take is to the refrigerator to get the creamer out for Michelle. And I get her cup out and have it sitting there so when she gets up, she makes her coffee. So those two stations are good for me as a reminder. You know, have you spent time with Him yet when you get up? Do you ever talk to Him when you wake up before you ever get out of the bed? I mean, boy, that gets the day going even better. Lord, thank you for a good night's rest. Or even if you had a rough night, thank you, Lord, for getting me through the night and for what sleep I did get. You know, God's good in every area of our lives. And so praise and prayer are vital in the spiritual life of a believer. Thanksgiving and prayer, we've got to have it. You've got to pray to thank Him. Think about it. That's how we talk to Him. That's prayer. You're talking to Him. God tells us that we need to do it. He speaks to us through His Word. So we've got to have both. It's vital. Now, I want to give some guidelines for worship. How many need some help tonight on worship? We think that we have worship down, but we don't. We think we know all about it, but we don't. A lot of people, if you say, what's worship to you? Oh, that's coming to church. It's a lot more than just coming to church. Let's dig in tonight. Let's look at the word worship. Worship is defined as worthship, W-O-R-T-H. And the reason it's defined as worthship because it's where we engage our mind, our emotions, and our will to do what? To gratefully acknowledge the worth of our God. So what does worship do? It's worthship. It engages our mind, our emotions, our will to acknowledge the worth of our God and who He is and what He's done for us. So, with that being said, let me say this. There is no human activity as high and lofty as worth to God, worship to God, adoration to God. That is supreme. Nothing's higher than that. And so, you and I need to adore God in our worship. Nothing's higher than that. And as important as it is in electing a president in our country, the determination to worship God is supreme. It's even higher than that because He foremost needs to be worshiped. So, somebody once said this, we must keep living in biblical faithfulness. No matter what is happening around us in the world or in our own lives or in the lives of others that we know, we've got to keep living in biblical faithfulness. Biblical faithfulness. What is that? That is having faith in every step that we take that God's got this, that God's in control, that God still sits on the throne, That's why we're walking by faith. That means we're not walking by sight in what we see. We're walking in what we can't see. Moses spent a lot of his days toward the end seeing the invisible. Who Jesus is. It tells us that in Hebrews 11. As seeing Him who is invisible. Have you ever seen Him who is invisible? I have, and I know you have. If you're saved, you can see God's fingerprints in everything around us. You can see it in miracles. You can see it in answering of prayer. You can see it in God still saving souls. You can see it in God meeting the needs of His people. You can see it in encouragement that's given by somebody. That's how God ministers. He does it through us. We are His hands, we are His eyes, we are His feet, we are His mouthpiece. We've got to be available to allow God to do that through us. He already lives in us, and He's waiting to do some things through us. And if you sit back and say, I just don't understand how good God's been to me because I just don't deserve it. Well, He loves you, and He thinks you do deserve it because He put you in His family and you're one of His children. And so He wants you to see how good He is by what He does for you through other people. So, with that being said, our chief end in life is for this purpose, and that is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. You know why I can say forever? Because we can enjoy Him down here, and then when we leave here, we can still enjoy Him as we go home to heaven. I think we can enjoy Him through the time of death and being there. I really do. I think that there's not a moment. I think when we die, we see Him then. You know, we couldn't see Him who was invisible, but boy, we sure could feel Him. And we sure could get a glimpse of Him through the Word of God and through what's going on around us through others in church. But then, when we step out of this life into the next life, we see the one who was doing all of it. He said, I was the one that was right there living in you, my spirit, and I was walking with you every day. I'm the one that took care of you, saved you. And boy, there's the scars in His hands and the scars in His feet and in His side. And the thing we'll see is those scars. You know, there's no scars in heaven, somebody said, but there will be, because Jesus will be wearing them. And it'll be your scars and my scars that He took upon Himself, and He paid our sin debt in full. So when we see Him, we're going to see grace. When we see Him, we're going to see mercy. When we see Him, we're going to see love. Because that's who He is. Man, I'm about to have a spell. Nobody else may get a hold of Him, but it's getting a hold of me, because I'm just an old sinner saved by God's grace. And that's how much He loved me. So, here's where we're at, church. If we've been made to worship and magnify Him, then we need to know how to do it. God made us to do that, to magnify Him, to worship Him, and to give Him thanks. So, we need to know how to do that. So in Nehemiah chapters 12, it begins with a long list of names. Now verse 24 helps us to see that there were two choirs who stood opposite of each other. In fact, let's go read verse 24. And the chief of the Levites right here, and then it gives some names, Hashabai, Sherebiah, and Jeshua, the son of Kedemiel, with their brethren over against them, to praise and to give thanks according to the commandment of David, the man of God, ward over against ward. So we've got two choirs that are standing opposite of each other. That's what the Levites did. And so when we see that, what are they doing? They are giving praise and thanksgiving to God. I want to spend the remaining moments that we have tonight and give you 4 worship guidelines. We need to know how to do it if we were made to magnify Him. And here are 4 worship guidelines. Number 1, let's start by looking at the purpose of worship. Now, what is the purpose of worship? Now, in verse 27, we're reading here about a dedication service that was given for the newly constructed wall. It took 52 days for Nehemiah and his workers to reconstruct and to build. And so this is the dedication service here in verse 27, and at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem. I want to say something right here. That dedication service could have taken place at the temple area, but it wasn't. It was taking place at the wall of Jerusalem. Now you got to hold on and let me give you 3 reasons why I believe Nehemiah wanted it there. And I'll give that to you at the end. They sought the Levites out of all their places to bring them to Jerusalem, to keep the dedication with gladness or joy, both with thanksgivings and with singing, with cymbals, psalmistries, and with harps. So, we're reading about a dedication service for this newly constructed wall. The Levites were brought in to celebrate joyfully, right here the Bible says, this dedication with songs of thanksgiving. And that's what they were doing, and with the music of the instruments, of the cymbals and the psalmistries and the harp. It was grateful celebration, and it was thanksgiving, and it was dedication. Those were the 3 main things right here. You've got grateful celebration. Celebrating what? Celebrating all that God had done on behalf of the people. Then you had not just grateful celebration, but thanksgiving, giving thanks to God. And then that dedication that was to Him. Those were the 3 main things. And folks, those things take us to the very heart of what worship is all about. We've got celebration. So when you and I come to the house of God on Sunday and here on Wednesday night, these are the 3 main things. We're coming to celebrate Him. What are we celebrating? We're celebrating the fact that we've been born again. We're celebrating the fact that God's been good to us. We're celebrating the fact that God is with us and He never leaves us. We're celebrating all those promises that God has given to us in His Word. We're celebrating His Word that was given to us and prayer that we have to offer to Him. We're celebrating the fact that we can sing songs of worship to Him. It's a time of celebration. But I've got to be honest with you. When I come in here and look out, the faces don't look like they're celebrating. They look like that they're just sitting there as zombies waiting for the service to end so they can get out of here. Well, I've fulfilled my obligation. Bless God. Boy, I wished He'd hurry. You don't say it out loud, but you're thinking it. Boy, my stomach's growling. I sure am hungry. Everything is about self while you're sitting there, and it's supposed to be about Him. Do you get that? We came for Him. You and I are the church. This building's not the church. This is just the dwelling place that we meet in. And the church needs to be celebrating. We come to the house of God to give thanks. To thank Him for our church, to thank Him for our body of believers, our brothers and sisters, to thank Him for His Word, to thank Him for the many blessings that He's given us. And we come in dedication. When you come to church, you are you are in dedication to Him. You know, a lot of people come and they rededicate their life. They're rededicating their life to God to get back on track and say, God, I want to do the very best that I can for you and live closer to you than what I was living. So there are the three themes here. Now, celebration is the primary aspect of worship. In other words, when we come to celebrate, it does not begin with us. But we sure act like it does. It does not begin with us, but it begins with what God has said and what God has done. That's where it begins. And we often up the aspect of that worship, which is celebration. We're celebrating that fact. And I don't know about you, but we're celebrating also the fact of who God is. Not just what He said and what He's done, but who He is. Who He is to you and who He is to me. Can I ask you a question? What is God to you? Is He just some being to you? Is He just some aspect of the term God to you that you've heard all your life? Who is He to you? Is He precious? Do you love Him? I'm not talking about just saying I love you. Living like you love Him. Talking like you love Him. Acting like you love Him. Do you love Him? What is He to you? And so Thanksgiving is a way for you and I to marvel. You know, we see that word where people marveled in the Bible at the miracles that Jesus did. But Thanksgiving's a way of marveling in all of God's generosity to us. That's part of Thanksgiving and worship. And I don't know about you, but notice verse 31, it tells us that these choirs were appointed to give thanks. That was their job and purpose. Then I brought up the princes of Judah upon the wall and appointed two great companies. Now that two great companies is referring to the choirs, the two choirs of them that gave thanks, whereof one went on the right hand upon the wall toward the dung gate. Boy, this gets good when you can visualize this. Here the Levites were brought in to celebrate, and it tells us these choirs were appointed to give thanks. Let me just say something right here. Our thanksgiving needs to be specific with God. I think it's best when we can itemize our thanks to God. Don't just say, Lord, thank you for all things. God likes to hear it from us. He wants to say, Lord, I want to thank you for saving me, and I want to thank you for my health, and I want to thank you for my family, and I want to thank you for being with me, Lord, when I felt alone, and I want to thank you for touching me when I was sick, and I want to thank you, Lord, for helping me when I couldn't go, and giving me strength when I was weak, and Lord, I sure did need peace because I didn't understand what I was going through, but thank you for that peace that passeth all understanding. Lord, I needed comfort when I went down by the graveyard. And God, you came through and comforted my soul. And you gave me the promise where Paul said, comfort one another with these words. I want to thank you that you're coming back. I want to thank you that the dead in Christ shall rise first. And we which are remain, He wants to hear it specifically. Not just give thanks, Lord, for all that you've done in general, and you have to do that in some places. I'm talking about when you got your quiet time with Him and you got all that time to spend with Him praying. Oh, He wants us to be specific. These three elements, celebration, thanksgiving, and dedication, how are they expressed? They're expressed by our total being. Our all. And so when we celebrate, we engage our minds by recalling all that God has done for us. That's part of that celebrate. When we give thanks, we are expressing our hearts in gratitude to Him. In dedication, we are employing our wills by surrendering to Him. All of this is part of worship. It's not just singing. It's surrendering to Him. It's celebrating Him. There's more to worship than just coming to church and singing songs. But it's being specific in what He's done for us. You see, that is the purpose of worship. Number two, I want to say something about the joy of worship. Now, the opportunity for us to magnify God was supremely a happy occasion. I mean, and it ought, here we go again. We come to church to magnify Him. But do we come to do it in joy? If you came to magnify Him, I'm going to get on myself right here too, because I'm guilty of this as well. That means when we come to church to magnify Him, we're so full of joy that when somebody comes up to you and says, "How are you?" you don't, "Oh boy, you just don't know. I've had a rough week." That's not magnifying God, and I've been guilty of that. If you're full of joy, then you're going to say, "Boy, God's been good to me." You're going to focus on that which is good things. God has been good to me, and man, He blessed me this week, and I've had a great, even though your week may have fell all apart, you still had a good week because He let you live. And He let me live. And He seen us through what we had to go through, even though we didn't understand it. That's being full of joy, a happy occasion, as part of the joy of worship. Did you know the secret of acceptable joy, that which is acceptable, is not simply what we do, but how we do it? How do you worship? Do you worship with joy? How do you do it? Well, some people try to worship Him, and man, their face just tells it. They look miserable. I mean, some of them look like they've drunk pickle juice. That ain't why we come to church. And I know we come sometimes not feeling good, but we're still coming to worship Him. You know what I do when I don't feel good? I'll whisper to somebody that I know's praying, "Would you pray for me? I need God's help today." But I know God's good, and as soon as it comes out of my mouth, I know God's going to help me. I mean, because His word don't return void, and He's going to bless His word. I can't tell you how many times that I've been hurting and got up and the pain went away as soon as I started preaching. It happens every time. I've been sick to my stomach and walked up here and it left me. I've had a headache and walked up here and it left me. I was troubled by something somebody told me right before the service and got up here and it was lifted. God just does it. Now, I'm not going to say it don't come back when I get done, step back down on the floor, because most of the time it does come back. But I thank Him for what He does in helping me. So worship was never meant to be dull and boring. God, I mean, it never was. There's nothing stereotyped or monochrome about giving thanksgiving and dedication to God and singing praises. We see here a wide variety of musical gifts that were expressed here through these instruments being played. In fact, in verse 35 and verse 41, it tells us that the priests played the trumpets. I mean, that was another instrument that was used. And so, the most prominent place for music right here, these two large choirs were giving thanks on behalf of all the people. You say, how do you know that they were large? Because the Bible said they were two great companies. Now, a great company's a big group, a large group that it tells us in verse 31, 2 great companies of them gave thanks. And so, this passage is filled with that which passes excellent. I mean, it really does. Because in verse 27, they're celebrating joyfully, with gladness. Notice dedication with gladness, with joy. And then the choirs here, they're not just choirs, they're large choirs, and they're joining in with the rest of them, giving thanks and singing praises to the Lord. So, notice verse 43. The Bible said that the priest offered great sacrifices. Also that day they offered great sacrifices and they rejoiced. Why? Because God had made them to rejoice with great joy and gladness. So here they are offering great sacrifices. How can they do that? Nothing's half-hearted about their joyful celebration here in adoration. You know why? Because all of it, it's an outflow from a grateful heart of people who have experienced the generosity of God. It just flows out of you. You can't help it. How many people say, Lord, if you'll just heal me right here, as soon as this heals, I'm getting right back in church and I'm going to live for you and serve you and do what you want me to do. He heals them and they go back the way they were. They were vulnerable at the moment. They needed His healing hand. But God knew they didn't mean what they said. He wasn't surprised by that. But we've got to be willing to, and this is part of worship, surrender to Him. What does that mean? Let Him lead you. Let Him be your Lord of your life, because He wants to be Lord of your life. Number 3, I want to say something about the witness of worship in verse 31 through 39. Now in these verses, and I'm not going to take time to read all of these, it tells us that the leaders went up on top of the wall. Here's where they're at. Now the Jews had been accustomed to having the workers and the watchers on the wall, but now the people here were being called to be worshipers on the wall. They were assigned that. And these large choirs walked on top of this wall, one to the right, the other to the left. And here's how it went. Ezra was the worship leader of one side, and Nehemiah was the worship leader on the other side. Can you imagine what was going on right here as they got up on that wall singing? And the reason why that it was on top of the wall is because it was... Let me just give you 3 reasons why I believe Nehemiah wanted it to take place on the walls themselves. First of all, it was important for the people to see and to feel the walls during this dedication service. Why was that? Because it was a visual reminder of God's faithfulness. How God had been faithful to them through every day and every step of reconstructing that wall. I want you to know that you and I sometimes need a visual. We need to see and touch the very things in our lives so we too can be reminded of God's faithfulness and how faithful that He's been to you and me. Secondly, the reason I believe is because the people were bearing witness to a watching world. The world was watching. What did they want them to see? That God had done the work. That He and He alone would be glorified. That was the second reason. Because they were bearing witness to the fact God did the work. And that God alone should be glorified. Do you remember what the enemy said? It goes back to chapters 4 of Nehemiah, verse 3. You know what the enemy said about the wall? Why, they're so weak that a fox could not